Hello, everyone. And I really have no words to articulate how excited I am about Paul's upcoming talk, because he's talking about a subject matter that is very near and dear to my heart. Please join me in welcoming to our virtual stage Paul Debevec. He is the senior scientist for USC, ITC, and Google, and he'll be introducing himself, telling about his background, and sharing his what he's going to be talking about here. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hey, let me really appreciate it, Molly. It's great to be here at AI Showbiz version 4.0. My name is Paul Debevec, and I'm a scientist at the USC Institute for Creative Technologies here in Los Angeles, and also Google, also working out of LA, specifically the Playa Vista studio. And I'm going to try to share some slides and talk a bit about digital actor technology that we've been part of. And I will hit this, and I'll hit this, and hopefully you see a planet, and then I'll start up a slideshow. And hopefully we're good there. So yeah, there's that. And then there's this website. I think you'll see that again at the end. Most of what I'll talk about today kind of revolves around this piece of technology that we've been working on developing for a while, called the light stage. And it's basically just some sphere with inward pointing, typically LED lights these days, that can produce kind of computer controlled patterns of illumination on whoever is sitting in it or standing in it. And it turns out there's a bunch of different things that we can do with these things that involve creating digital actors and such. The original concept actually was to surround people with controlled lighting environments as a film production technique. And what you can see here is our 2002 project, where we, for the first time, surrounded people with color LEDs from all directions to light them with the light that had been recorded of a real environment out in a forest, or some ancient city or something like that, and then or rendered out from a virtual environment, and then compositing them in to that environment, and they look like they're lit the right way for that environment, so you can kind of believe the shot. And maybe it took a while, but now that we're at the point where you can get denser LED panels as a kind of a standard product, we're seeing that this lighting reproduction approach is becoming a key element of a lot of the virtual productions that are happening these days, kind of surrounding sets with color LEDs to light actors right, so they're lit right and then composited into the scenes appropriately. That actually isn't the first kind of light stage that I was able to build, because we started this a little bit before color LEDs were commercially available. And so the very first light stage actually just had a single incandescent spotlight, and we had this contraption that we pulled ropes to spin it around somebody in a spiral. And we would get, in the course of a minute, their face lit from every direction that light can come from. And then the paper that we showed at the ACM SIGGRAPH conference in 2000 showed that if you kind of multiply that data set against a data set of the color and intensity of the illumination from every direction in an environment, that you can relight that person's photo with any lighting you want after the fact, or even spin the lighting around of Grace Cathedral around one of our undergrad students here, or quickly switch that lighting to a different environment in post-production. And it wasn't until we could literally put color LEDs all around, we could just kind of get it in camera. But being able to change the lighting in post-production is a pretty useful thing to be able to do. We've, fortunately, I've been at Google for almost 4 years now. And one of our systems that we got to build is kind of the LSX4 system. This is at one of the open houses. I don't know if this is the specific one that Molly came to. It's possible, but we light it up on occasion. And we've been recording lots of data sets of different people with images of every direction that light can come from. And we know that anyone who's been to the light stage, we can kind of model them in 3D, show them in different angles, different lighting. But at some point, we've captured enough people, or we've recorded enough people, that we can start to take photos of just somebody else. So here's someone we actually recorded. This is actually our program manager, Peter. I guess we had 7 cameras running on him, and you can see another one of these one light at a time data sets. Because the neat thing is that using AI, using machine learning, we were able to publish a paper at the SIGGRAPH conference last year that showed that we could take a picture of a new person, like the one on the left, who's never been to our light stage, and predict what they would look like under different illumination. So you can take your selfie and then decide how you want it lit later. Put it with either better lighting, more attractive lighting, or just lighting that's more consistent with the scene that you're trying to virtually composite yourself into. And now that we have Zoom virtual backgrounds, we're all doing a lot of that. The technique that the light stages have gotten used commercially more than anything directly from our laboratory at this point has been for high resolution facial scanning. Try to get a very high resolution 3D model of your face down to skin pores and fine creases. And that's something that we did as soon as we had bright white LEDs. We put them all over our Light Stage 5 system. We actually put polarizers on all the LEDs so we could analyze the reflectance of the skin better. And we found that there were these set of just 4 lighting patterns that we can shoot really quickly that we call the gradient lighting conditions. One of them just lights the whole thing up evenly, and then the other 3 are just kind of gradients of light, bright to dark along the x-axis, along the y-axis, and along the z-axis. And if you take those 4 photos really quickly, you can actually compute what the person's shape is very accurately. Just the ratio of the pixel values in the x to the full or the y to the full or the z to the full lit condition produce these images that kind of divide out your skin color and leave you with the way that you look if you were a plaster sculpture, all the same color, which it's very easy to analyze shape from that. And then if you just kind of pack it all together in something that the game industry would call a surface orientation map or a surface normal map, you get a 3-dimensional record of the face that's accurate to every little sub-millimeter pixel that you have in your camera. And we found we can improve this even more by polarizing the light. If you've ever worn polarized sunglasses and see that they can block the shine off of the road or the shine off of a lake, you can block the shine off of somebody's skin too and get that kind of diffuse, very flat lit image of them. And if you flip the polarizers around, you can bring that shine back in, accentuate it, and then the difference between those 2 images is an image of just the shine off of the skin. And these specular reflection maps that we get are our best record of the highest resolution detail we can get of the face, because from that, none of that light actually got into the skin and scattered around and blurred out. There's no subsurface scattering in that. So if we measure the skin shape from the specular reflection, we can get scans that have skin pores and fine creases, this 1/10 of a millimeter detail that's really nice to have if you're creating something that needs to be a totally photoreal digital human character. And in 2008, we got to work with a innovative facial animation company called Image Metrics. Now they go as Faceware. And Image Metrics had an AI-based facial animation system that we were able to take this actress, Emily O'Brien, and create a digital version of her face that you can play. So this is a totally rendered digital face back in 2008. The lips, the eyes, the teeth, everything until right before you get to the ears and the hairline is digital. You can see the digital replacement of the diffuse component, the specular component, which looks pretty intense there, and then the facial mesh. And if you take it all away, this is the footage we started with before we replaced her face. We didn't match it 100%, but we did match it well enough so that most people looking at it, they just thought that was Emily. We fooled Emily herself. She wondered what we've been doing for 4 months. And once we had that technology available to get really high resolution scans of people in natural facial expressions, this became very interesting for visual effects production in creating digital characters that needed to have that level of detail. So we were contacted by the people doing the visual effects for Avatar, and we scanned the cast of Avatar so that the digital artists at Weta could transform people like Zoe Saldana into a still very detailed yet transformed version of herself for the character of Neytiri. Stephen Lang, who's kind of the villain of the film, has a digital stunt double that's accurate to skin pores and fine creases, and even says lines of dialogue in the film.
Get up, March!
There's a digital guy there.
I kind of hoped you'd say that.
And that helps the visual effects folks make much more engaging visual effects when they can do it. And there's probably been about 40, maybe even 50 movies at this point that have used the light stage facial scans. And I thought I'd highlight just a couple of them that seem sort of relevant to some of the themes we've seen here in the conference so far. One of them that was, I think it felt like the job was a little bit more important than others, was for the movie Furious 7, which we'd started scanning actors for, but then production shut down for a huge tragedy, which is that one of the lead cast members, Paul Walker, was passed as a passenger in a tragic car accident. And it was unclear whether this movie would ever be made at that point. It had been exactly half of it had been shot. Paul Walker had shot some of his scenes, but only about half of them. So how would you do that? And as it turns out, a few months after this had happened, the family had been in touch with the studio about what to do. And it turns out they were supportive of trying to use digital effects technology to complete the film. And also that Paul Walker had two younger brothers, Cody Walker and Caleb Walker, who both had something of a resemblance to Paul. Basically, Caleb Walker, who was quite close in age, looked a lot like Paul from the top part of his face, and Cody Walker, who was a bit younger, had more of the correct kind of wider jawline. And so both of them trained a lot in acting and got the right haircuts, worked with the same trainer. We scanned both of them at high resolution and many different facial expressions with and without the beard stubble. And all of that data went down to the amazing visual effects artists at Weta Digital, again, to try to create a version of their brother Paul that could hold up in movies and even intercut with real footage of Paul Walker. And so this is an example of just how freaking good it was. The digital Paul Walker actually shows up in 300 shots of the film, which was not something that was known when the movie came out. And the visual effects artists really did a ton of amazing work. And it still is kind of a high water mark for digital characters at this point. And these are just a couple of scenes that you can see where, believe it or not, it's a digital Paul Walker. The body, the arms, all of that is usually his brother Caleb, who is, wasn't a professional actor, but he learned as much as he could. Vin Diesel is real in this case here, but that is a completely digital Paul Walker. They had some reference footage of him from a previous movie where he basically did some of these expressions, but usually it's not in the right lighting, not quite from the right angle, low resolution. That would all get replaced with the digital footage there. So they were able to complete the film. Another film, which was spoken about on the first day of AI Showbiz, was Blade Runner 2049. And there were two other cases where we basically scanned two people to try to combine them into one. One of which was for a hologram scene where these two actresses here, Ana de Armas and Mackenzie Davis, were basically transformed into one character briefly, where one stands in the hologram of the other. So both of them were scanned at high resolution, and then they were composited into a kind of a composite digital person that had some of the facial features of each, so that it would cross-dissolve into something that didn't just look like a video overlay, but actually seemed like a combined version of the two actors. And then, of course, the most notable thing is that they were able to bring back the character of Rachel, played by Sean Young. This is how she looked in 1982. Sean Young was scanned to get basic facial structure, but it's been a long time since 1982. So they also scanned another actress, here, Lauren Pita, who has a passing resemblance to Rachel's character, but she could wear the makeup. She had the right skin tone, the right age of skin, and she basically became sort of a digital skin donor. You can see our grad student Chloe Legendre getting actually a microgeometry sample of a couple parts of her face that gets used to up-res our facial scans to 100th of a millimeter detail. And so this is going to be a scene here. Hopefully you can hear me over the audio. This will look creepy for a second with the bones record. And that's a digital version of Rachel. And for me, it was like an hour, it was like, or not an hour, it was like a year and a half between when we did the scans and the movie finally came out. And I wasn't even sure how much they would use this character in the film. So as soon as the scene came on, I was like, okay, I got to look at every little flying hair, every little crease, see how well everything came out. And it ended up being animated so well under the guidance of John Nelson and some really key consulting by Habib Zargapur on the facial animation and all the other great work by the visual effects studio, that I was just pulled right back into the story with the performance. It was a realistic enough, emotional enough performance that I had to wait for the Blu-ray to really scrutinize everything. And then the good news is that I actually won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. And the unspoken rules are if a buddy of yours wins an Oscar for Best Visual Effects and you helped in any way on it, you get to take a picture with him. So here's John Nelson with his very fresh, not even plate on it, Oscar there the night of the Academy Awards. And one other film that came up in AILA or AI Showbiz is Ready Player One, which is about virtual reality, this amazing visual effects film about virtual reality directed by Steven Spielberg. Great visual effects by Digital Domain. And in fact, they actually used the light stage a bit for some of the lead characters. This is Ty Sheridan getting scanned, and you can see that's the set of expressions that we often tend to do. So the actors have to do funny things with their faces. Turns out they're literally pros at it. So they're often very good. They're often very, very good at staying still, because you have to stay still for about 2.5 seconds to have the scan register perfectly. And most actors are just amazing at that. And so here's a scene where it actually transitions from a real version of him, and then he puts on a VR headset, the strap goes over his head, and it wipes to a totally digital version, so the camera can zoom in crazy close to his face as he goes into virtual reality. It's a neat use of a digital character.
Nowhere except the oasis. Virtual universe.
And they also use it to kind of help start the Oasis versions of the characters as well. So let's see here. Well, we're getting on in time, so I thought I'll try to mention 2 other projects that actually have been kind of personally moving for me to be part of, both of which are not about motion pictures. And one of them is based on a call that we got from the Smithsonian Institution in 2013, asking if we could do a light stage scan for them, but that the subject wouldn't be able to come to our lab in Playa Vista. Could we bring the light stage to Washington, D.C. to scan some VIP over there? And they wouldn't tell us who, but we kind of sort of thought maybe it could be someone pretty cool. And so we said, yeah, we're going to try it out. And then in 4 very busy days, we basically stripped lights and cameras off of our own light stage, and then put this on this mobile rig that could go in a shipping crate, and brought it over to Washington, D.C. And we had a data set up, and then it was showtime. We had to dress a little bit better than usual for a typical day at the laboratory, and they kind of set us up under the portrait of Lincoln in the state dining room, and I remembered to get out of the shot so Pete Souza could get a nice shot for the coffee table book on this one here. About a 2-second scan, 10 photos real quick, our gradient lighting, we had all the polarization. There's actually a little bit of time afterwards, and so I had to field some questions from our subject about the technology, and I did explain polarized gradient illumination, which if I thought of better stuff to talk about, I would have. But this is the scan that we got, which is basically for the National Portrait Gallery for their collection, and it's the first time that a sitting U.S. president had been scanned digitally, and only the second time that we actually had a real 3D measurement of a portrait of a president in office. The previous one was Abraham Lincoln. And there was a plaster cast taken of his face about a month before his assassination, and so there's a bit of a connection across the decade.
Oh, speaking of assassinations, just kidding. Would you like to take any Q&As right now?
Yeah, let's see here. let me just give me like one or 2 minutes to wrap up, and I'd love to take a Q&A.
Oh, yes.
Alrighty, very good. So last thing I just want to say, real-time stuff is very much of interest these days. We got to work on kind of a video game character version of the pipeline with Activision a few years ago to do digital IRA. And this kind of project recently, if you saw the TED conference last year, Doug Roble from Digital Domain, using a lot of amazing AI technology to do the facial animation and then some scans from our laboratory, transformed himself into a real-time digital character that he actually had the ability to step onto stage and show his own face in motion capture live.
Why me? Well, I'll do just about anything for science. I mean, look at me.
So he had some bravery there. And then the final thing that I'll mention is a project that I think we'll hear a little bit about from our next speaker, Heather Mayo, that we got to collaborate on in using the light stage technology to record testimony of survivors of the Holocaust. And this is a Holocaust survivor, Pinchas Guter, being recorded from about 100 cameras in our large light stage 6 device. The cameras that we've used the most so far is this kind of set of 30 around the equator of the stage. And we built a video projector array based hologram display. So it's actually a true 3D hologram. It's not just some flat TV with a white box behind it. It's actually an auto multiscopic image that you can see from different directions and move into eye contact and move out of eye contact with it. And we were able to demonstrate this at the SIGGRAPH conference and at our laboratory.
How did you survive the Holocaust?
How did I survive? I survived, I believe, because Providence watched over me. And also the fact that for a long time, my parents watched over us and guarded us and kept us hidden for almost 3.5 years.
Go ahead and I'll
both before the ghetto.
There. So we're getting to continue to work with some of that data, which is exciting. And then the very last thing, in our light stage at Google, we've developed it into a volumetric capture system that emphasizes the ability to be able to relight the assets in post-production. And we do that because we actually record people with 2 different lighting conditions that the light stage goes between that read out a surface orientation map, a surface normal map at 30 frames per second. And so you'll see here somebody stepping into the light stage from our team named Christoph. And we're gonna bounce between the 2 lighting conditions. We also have this infrared pattern of light that goes on. And we've got a 3-dimensional version of him with every frame of his animation that we can then composite into any other kind of scene, such as the Spruce Goose Hangar in Playa Vista, which is one of Google's newer offices that we might get to go back to someday. Okay, that is everything. So there's a couple of websites down there, and if there's still any time for questions, I am more than happy to answer.
I think we can get a few in here. Hi, Paul. Have you experimented with VR for animals?
Great question. We did a test for Game of Thrones for their wolves that they wanted to do, and we got as far as having an enterprising German Shepherd as kind of a test animal in there. Things basically worked, but this was the very first season of Game of Thrones, so their budgets weren't huge yet, and they wanted to do the whole thing for $5,000, and we said, well, we can't really do all that work for that. So I wish they'd come back to us for season 6 when their budgets were a little bit bigger. But I think it basically works, and we'd love to do more animals now. If you have a project, let us know.
Oh, this is from Mark Ricard, who you may know. He was one of our wonderful speakers last year. He wants to know, is digital archiving of performing artists underway, and what is the timeline for use cases of these assets?
Great question. Okay, cool. And can you still hear me? I'm seeing a little exclamation points. Okay, great. So recording performers, my gosh, yes. The first image I showed right before the Relightables project of our light stage, you might have noticed there was a woman kind of in a maroon robe, and we did a project with the Creative Lab that Google has in Sydney, Australia, recording operatic performances. So they actually performed most of an aria in the light stage, and then they turned it into an augmented reality application where you can take your smartphone in your own living room, and then various, opera performers sing to you or into each other, and like your wall, breaks apart and somebody comes in from the universe over there and such. It's an interesting thing. Again, we'd love to do more of that. I think things with, musicians could make a lot of sense as a thing to record in this technology.
Thank you so much, Paul. Oh my goodness, this was so wonderful. I'm just going to go ahead and I've stopped recording. You hit it out of the ballpark. I'm drooling over here because I'm sandwiched between my two favorite speakers, because we're talking about holograms, which I adore. Thank you for the work that you're doing, Paul, and your participation with AI Showbiz Summit. We're really grateful.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to your talk, Heather.